Welcome to Life, Death, and the Law, presented by the law firm of Beeson, Garner, and Hansen, hosted by attorneys Shawn Garner and Adam Hansen.
Welcome to Life, Death, and the Law. I'm Shawn Garner, attorney with Beeson, Garner, and Hansen. I'm in studio here with Cody Beeson and Adam Hansen. I'm also joined by Thomas Sparks. We are attorneys. We do estate planning, but we like to talk about what's going on in the politics that affect us every day, not just the headliners, but the things that fall under the radar that you ought to know about. And one of those things right now is what's going on with financial securities, and in particular, it's called Fincen. Adam, what does Fincen stand for?
Fincen is an acronym. It stands for Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. This is a government agency that's put together by the executive branch, the Biden administration. And they are coming after you if you have a business. They want to know everybody that's involved in your business. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Shawn, this came to light last week. Or a couple weeks ago, we went to Boston for continuing education courses. We've got to do that annually, where we have to take a certain amount of hours of continuing education to keep up our law licenses. And one of the classes that we attended was a refresher on this new law that just came into being in 2024. So it starts this year. And we're trying to get the word out as much as possible because it's pretty onerous. And Shawn, why?
Well, it was interesting because we were in Boston, Massachusetts, and there were attorneys all over the nation that focus in estate planning. So these are the people that should know what's going on with federal laws regarding financial issues. And there was the presenter saying, okay, we've got this new law, Fincen. It started in 2024. How many people have heard about it? And most of us meagerly raise our hands. And then she says, okay, how many people know what the filing requirements are? And I would say a minority of the people raise their hands. Bear in mind, this is all attorneys that work specifically in estate planning, helping people understand their requirements. Traditionally are helping people establish LLCs and trusts and those types of entities to help run their business and carry on wealth from one generation to the next. And so she goes, how many people know that if you don't file the requirements by a certain date, there is a fine of $500 per day for noncompliance? And, the room gets eerily quiet. How many people know that you are also subject to 2 years of imprisonment if you don't report? And now she's really got our attention, this presenter, and she was very well educated on this. She says, I'm going around the nation and I'm talking to attorneys in your field because we're trying to get the information out. And if attorneys who are trying to keep up to date on this don't even know about it, what's the chances that that people in general know about it? So it comes out that attorneys typically who help individuals establish their businesses, they're the reporting agents. And so under the law in 2024, if we help somebody as an attorney to establish their business, then we have to disclose to Fincen, which is this federal agency, and as if they're some type of criminal, this financial criminal enforcement network, we have to give them their ID, and we can't just give them a photo ID of the first, the front of their driver's license, right, Adam? Because we just did this for our own organization. What did you have to do?
Yeah, you have to upload a copy of your driver's license or passport, some sort of government form of ID with a picture and your signature.
Front and back.
Mm-hmm.
And we, when clients come into our office and set up an estate plan, we get a copy of their ID because we want to make sure that when they're coming in to sign their documents, of course, we sign a notary log and make sure that they are who they say they are. But we don't even have enough information for the people that we've set up businesses for to comply with all the reporting requirements that is required under this law. So, Adam, we talked about that yesterday about how we're going to reach out to some of our clients and do this, but we thought this is a good thing to talk to individuals out there. If you're thinking about starting an LLC or you currently have an LLC, do you know that you might be subject to a $500 a day fine and 2 years of imprisonment? So how difficult was it to file the report for the Fincen?
It took me about an hour, and Tom, you helped me with this a little bit. It's kind of, so there's a website set up that you can go to, and you've got to go through these hoops, and there's different questionnaires and different tabs and things like that. And along the way, it gets a little cumbersome. It gets a little confusing, the word choicing that they're using, and then you start to confuse yourself, like, well, am I this or am I that, or what am I as it pertains to this filing? And so it took us about an hour just because we wanted to be absolutely sure about the wording and if we were getting it right. And once we got that right, I mean, it's relatively straightforward, but for your average person, I would estimate, like, if we're going to send out a notice, which we're planning to do to all of our clients that have created LLCs in the past before 2024, they need to go on to this website and they need to do this on their own. And the more I went through the website myself, I thought, I don't know. I lack a lot of confidence that they're going to be able to do it on their own. And now does that pull us into the arena? And that's a lot of liability for us to come in and try and do that for every client that's ever had an LLC created since the existence of our firm. It would be incredibly onerous and daunting. It's a daunting task. So my hope is that the layperson can go through this website and be able to file a report on their own. But I as I went through it myself, I thought, I don't know. I have my doubts that they're going to be able to do it by themselves. They'll probably need a little bit of assistance. And so we're gearing up to figure that out. How can we help clients that have done LLC work in the past or corporations in the past before 2024 confidently fill out this form? The other question comes up, Shawn, do we even do it? So we have this. The reason I bring that up is because right off the bat in March, there was a group from Alabama that sued the federal government because this was what they say unconstitutional. They actually were able to get a victory in the district court in Alabama, which stated in that stayed the enforcement of this particular federal agency in Alabama and in that circuit, but has been appealed by the federal government. So that means it's just on hold. If you're in Alabama's district or circuit, then right now it's just on pause. But everywhere else in the nation, we're not exempt from going through with all these requirements that Shawn just talked about of reporting. And if we don't report, then we've got these penalties that can be assessed. It says they may be assessed. You may be imprisoned. So
now, how broad is this? I mean, if I'm a little mom and pop shop that I set up my LLC 5 years ago, and my company brings in, let's say, $100,000 a year, and I only bring home $50,000 a year, right? I've got maybe 50% overhead, and so I'm small. I'm not big enough to be incorporated into this, and plus I did it 5 years ago. So does it even apply to me? Am I even worried about this?
So you actually are the one that the federal government is targeting. You are the target. So for whatever reason, they believe, and really this was, I don't want to say it was the Democratic Congress back during the Trump administration. We looked at the history of this, and because we were like,
how did this law even get passed?
How the heck did this even get passed? Like, this is so bad. Well, what happened at the end of 2020, after the election, there was if you remember, both the House and the Senate were Democratic controlled. So the Democratic Party controlled those two houses, and they put through this omnibus bill that was designed for security. Well, in that bill, they also had this other bill that included all these reporting requirements. So that passed. It passed the House and the Senate. It went to President Trump.
Do we know a date on when this happened?
It was the fall of 2020, and President Trump thought it was a bad idea, thought it was horrible. And so he used his veto power to shut that thing down.
And as if he has nothing else going, this is the election of 2020.
Yeah, it was the fall of 2020. I mean, it's all this stuff
the
going on.
world is upside down at this point.
And so he shuts it down, but it goes back.
Well, I was going to say, is this that $600 reporting requirement? Because I remember hearing that around that time.
it was that time that those requirements were being discussed to be put into this bill, and everybody got up in arms, and so they took it out.
But they left the LLC stuff in.
And I don't even know when they stuck this in and who read it and who knew about it, because I didn't hear anything about it until recently.
So fast forward the end of 2020. So President Trump vetoed the bill, this law. He was not a fan of this, and rightfully so. And I imagine most of the conservatives in Congress were up in arms about it too, but they were outnumbered. So President Trump vetoes it. And then January of 2021, I can't remember the date. Do you got the date, Tom? But the Senate overrode the veto, which is very difficult to do. I mean, it rarely happens in this whole legislative process. But they overrode President Trump's veto, and lo and behold, it put this law into effect beginning 2024, January 1st of 2024. And so that's where we're at today. And that's why a lot of people, I mean, this was years ago. And now it's all of a sudden to the populace. We're like, oh, wait, what? This got passed 3-4 years ago, and now we got to deal with it. So it's nasty. I mean, you read, and it's not just for LLCs. We keep using LLC because a lot of our clients do LLCs. It's very rare that we do corporations anymore, just because they're difficult to manage. They're difficult to keep up, and you've got to do more accounting. You've got to do more tax returns and things like that. So most people nowadays will turn to the LLC as their planning mechanism or their business mechanism, because it's so much more efficient and simple to manage and to do your taxes. And so really what the bill goes after is any entity that's created by your state. So that means in our state of Arizona, in order for us to have an LLC, a legitimate LLC, it has to go through the Arizona Corporation Commission to be authorized or approved. Once it's approved by Arizona, then now you have an actual LLC. You have to do that same process if you're going to create a corporation. You have to go through the Corporation Commission and be approved. You have to do that for a limited partnership. Note that I said limited partnership, not a normal general partnership, a limited partnership, because limited partnerships enjoy liability protection to a certain extent. And so that has to be approved by the state of Arizona too. So if you're doing a general partnership where you're not being approved by the state of Arizona, then you are exempt from these requirements of reporting.
Unless you file with the Arizona Corporation Commission, because you can file a general partnership with the Corporation Commission. And so this law incorporates anything that requires or resulted in a filing with your state agency, like the Corporation Commission. So back to my question, I'm this mom and pop shop making $100,000 a year, taking home $50,000 a year. I did this 5 years ago because LLCs were introduced to me as a very nice combination of having a legit company without having overwhelming amount of paperwork or annual filing requirements I'd have to do. I'd file one time with the Arizona Corporation Commission. I'd become recognized as a company, and then essentially the taxes would flow through to me individually, and I'd pay my taxes, and I'd be able to run my little mom and pop shop. So why should I have to be subject to these additional reporting requirements? The whole idea of the LLC is to get out of those additional filings.
Yeah, exactly right. And not only that, but you have to provide identification. And you and I were talking, Shawn, when it comes to election law, and the Democrats are so up in arms about providing a license to prove who you are in order to cast a vote, which I don't think is, that's not crazy talk to me. I mean, I have to provide a birth certificate for my kids to play football or to play in T-ball, but I can't.
I have to provide identification to buy spray paint.
But I can't provide any identification to say who I am or if I'm actually a citizen of this United States to vote in a national election. It boggles my mind. But yet, if I create a business now, an LLC, I have to provide an identification to the federal government, or I'm going to be fined $500 a day or be imprisoned for up to two years.
But you're telling me this isn't just going forward. This is telling me if I've done it 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and I'm running my landscaping company and writing off 50%, of the lawnmower costs and the gas and my pickup truck, then I still have to provide my ID, my home address, all my personal information to this government agency?
Absolutely. And the deal is nobody is exempt except for big companies. I would say big companies because it's going to be 20 or more employees, or you're making more than $5 million a year. So if you meet those criteria, then you are exempt from this. Why? I don't know. Is it just those that are under 20 employees that have been known to do money laundering or financial crimes? Are the businesses that are primarily money laundering making less than $5 million? Who knows? I want you to recognize that this is a government agency that was created by the Biden administration, essentially, and they are, going out and coming after you. For what purpose? Money laundering is the idea here.
Yeah, and it's under the Bank Secrecy Act that this is the foundation of this. It got passed after a veto from President Trump. It got passed. Thomas, did you find a date on that when it actually went through? So basically, Congress, Democratic Congress, passed this. And I know it was late January of 2021.
It became law January 1st, 2021.
It did?
Yeah, it was vetoed in December. It was overrode at the end of December, and then January 1st.
Oh, okay. So January 1st of 2021, this law comes into effect. Well, what else was going on at that time? I mean, right? The lawmakers had plenty of time to review and specifically consider each of the clauses in this Fincen Act, because they wouldn't stuff it in a big 1,000-page bill that had to do with our national defense or the epidemic that was going on with COVID, right?
Yeah, so there's sarcasm in your voice. Not only that, but there was the election. We weren't even quite sure, if it was going to be a Trump administration again or a Biden administration because of the issues that had arisen from the November election in 2020. All that was the backdrop of this bill just being squeaked by. I say squeaked by. It's like the legislative process definitely went through, and you get what you pay for when you cast a vote. This is what you get, and so the Congress did what they can do. It is legally valid. It is, in the sense of it became law. But the question is, are we going to allow it to continue to be law? And so this company, it was the National Small Business United, is the name of the plaintiff in the case against the national government in Alabama, and they won preliminarily. Well, we'll see as it goes up the court system. They're going to the appeals court, but we'll see. I imagine it's going to go to the Supreme Court, and we'll see what the Supreme Court says. My hope is that they strike this down. It seems incredibly onerous to force your national citizens to report like this. I mean, it's bad.
Yeah, it's always a bad thing, I think, when we have laws that disincentivize people to create wealth, to create jobs, to create things that will help the economy. And like all these small businesses, it's great because it brings actors who normally wouldn't want to put their names in the economic sphere because of fear of liability. And now they have this vehicle, an LLC, where they can get in and they can, try to stake their claim and make fortune and help other people, survive in the economy. But then when you have these reporting requirements, it disincentivizes them. They don't want to do an LLC anymore because they don't want to deal with all this stuff that they don't understand, that attorneys really are having a hard time wrapping their minds around. And I mean, I don't blame them at all, but it's just the unfortunate truth. I mean, at best, this was a well-intentioned bill to stop money laundering. At worst, it's malicious, and it's just trying to get control over the citizen and the populace.
When we come back, we're going to play you a clip of Gavin Newsom. This is an interview that he had, 2012, I think? Shawn, was that something? It's way back there. It's probably 7, 8 years ago.
Yeah, it was 12 years ago, so about 2012.
So it's an interesting clip we're going to play when we come back, because you'll see this Democratic mindset just be picked apart. And we'll be right back. This is Life, Death, and the Law.
Coming up, more thought-provoking conversations on life, death, and the law right after this. You're listening to Life, Death, and the Law, presented by Beeson, Garner, and Hansen, the law firm that has been voted Yuma's best 6 years in a row.
Welcome back to Life, Death, and the Law. We're talking about reporting requirements if you have a small business. And so it's called Fincen. And first of all, it's a really difficult thing to do if you're a small business owner, or I would think invasive in your privacy, because you have to disclose your home address. They don't want entities. They don't want you to list that you own it in a trust. They want an individual. They want names. They want addresses. They want identification, front and back of driver's license or your passport, and those things have to be uploaded to this database. And we're scratching our heads here. A lot of us lawyers that attended this conference in Boston where they described this law in detail, we're just puzzled at how this could possibly become law. And Thomas, you got a timeline on that for us.
Yeah, so it was introduced in the House back in March of 2020, and it bounces in between the House and the Senate as they're, trying to make edits, and they're trying to do some horse trading to know whose special interest is going to go into the bill and whose is going to get cut. So they go through the year of 2020 doing that. It's presented to the president for signature on December 11th, 2020. He vetoes it. That's Donald Trump at the time. December 2023. Then the House overrides the veto with a 2/3 vote on the 28th of December. The Senate overrides the presidential veto by 2/3 vote on January 1st of 2021, and that's the day it becomes law for the whole country.
And so we've got this 1,000-plus page bill, and it's dealing with national defense, and we're on, it's going between the Christmas holiday and New Year's on a hotly debated election and in the middle of the COVID pandemic, and this is when this law gets passed. So that kind of is the undertone for when the law gets passed. We got a few clips to play about the mindset. I don't know, Adam, I want to play that clip about Biden's chief executive advisor or economic advisor. Do you mind if we play that one first?
Yeah, sure.
This is a clip from Dave Rubin. It's called the Rubin Report. And he pulled out this interview between Jared Bernstein and MSNBC. And there's questions about how the national debt works and how printing money works and how the whole monetary system works. And this is the person that is the chief economic advisor for the Biden administration. So he knows all the answers. So let's go ahead and play this clip.
Biden's chief economic advisor. His name is Jared Bernstein. And he's asked about how the government can't go bankrupt because they can print their own money. And just watch this. This is absolutely mind-blowing.
The U.S. government can't go bankrupt because we can print our own money.
It obviously begs the question, why exactly are we borrowing in a currency that we print ourselves? I'm waiting for someone to stand up and say, why do we borrow our own currency in the first place?
Like you said, they print the dollar. So why does the government even borrow?
Well, again, some of this stuff gets, some of the language and concepts are just confusing. I mean, the government definitely prints money, and it definitely lends that money, which is why the government definitely prints money, and then it lends that money by selling bonds. Is that what they do?
This is his chief economic advisor, And you can see the gears kind of spinning in his head, and there's a little bit of smoke that's starting to sputter out of his ears. And he's like, well, how does the government get money? We're not even talking about taxes at this point. We're talking about raising money above and beyond taxes. And yes, there are government bonds sold. This is clear to even somebody with a 5th grade education. Government bonds get sold when they need to raise additional money for a special project like wars. That's what a war bond is. And he's figuring this out as he's describing it. So
it's like real time. You know what's sad about this? Like, I was actually infuriated by this because I'm watching this. I'm waiting for my answer. You know, what's the answer here? Why are we printing money? And well, I don't want to ruin it for you, but it never comes. And then I'm like, who is this guy?
Well, and
surely he can't be like in the administration. He's just, this guy. I don't know who he is. So Jared Bernstein, okay, when I look him up on Wikipedia, the wonderful encyclopedia of all knowledge, Wikipedia says Jared Bernstein is an American musician, not an economist. He's an American musician who is the chair of the United States Council of Economic Advisors. He is a senior fellow at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. Actually, from 2009 and 2011, Bernstein was the chief economist and economic advisor to then Vice President Joe Biden in the Obama administration. So he's just coming up again. He was already with Biden in the Biden administration. Hey, you're not qualified. You got a music degree. Why don't you come and tell me about economics?
Yeah.
That was during the Biden administration, the Obama administration. And now that Biden's back in, he just hires this guy as the head of the Economic Council of Economic Advisors. And so this is the guy that's supposed to be reading economic reports and then delivering them to the president and giving the president and his team ideas of what to do and how to do it and why things are happening. So anyway.
Yeah, let's play the tape. Now, mind you, we are not rewinding. We are continuing the interview. It sounds like we are rewinding because he keeps repeating himself, but this is a continuation of the same statement.
Mr. Bernstein, how does economics work? Right?
Here we go.
They sell bonds. Yeah, they sell bonds, right? Because they sell bonds and people buy the bonds and lend them the money. Yeah, so a lot of times, at least to my ear with MMT, the language and the concepts can be kind of unnecessarily confusing, but there is no question that the government prints money and then it uses that money to, yeah, I guess I can't really talk. I don't get it. I don't know what they're talking about. Like, cause it's like, the government clearly prints money, it does it all the time, and it clearly borrows. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this debt and deficit conversation. So I don't think there's anything confusing there.
I don't think I just oversold that clip. That is...
Is anybody else's mind blown here?
This is the guy. This is the guy that Biden has. I mean, we're not making this up. This is the guy. This is the guy. He comes in and says, hey, Mr. President, this is how economic affairs are going right now.
I have a theory. All right, so this is one less name Biden had to remember, so they just pulled him from the original cast.
Get old Bernstein, Bernie. Yeah. Get Bernie back in here.
Yeah, because he's just going to call the new guy by Bernstein. Yeah. So just
make it easy.
Yeah.
President, we don't want you to have too many names in your head.
So, Jean-Pierre, Karine Jean-Pierre, for, the White House press secretary.
Oh, yeah.
You watch her and you kind of swing back and forth in emotions between pity and disgust and just the utter incompetence that is displayed on a daily basis when she can't answer the simplest questions. And you think it can't get worse. And then you see this guy and you're like, well, I guess it can.
I mean, what did he think was going to happen? Like, this is a staged interview.
He knew the question beforehand.
Shouldn't you be prepped or something,
How does money work? Well, the government prints it.
We definitely
They asked a musician that.
I know, definitely. I mean, there is no question we print money.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein.
So, anyways,
at ease.
These are the type of people that are advising on the laws that are now in effect that are going to affect you and I. Now, these laws, they're a bit more than suggestions. They've got some teeth to them. And so if you've got a company, an LLC, I don't care if it's filed 20 years ago and you're making $100 a year on this, then you are subject to this requirement. You must disclose the names of the individuals that have up to a 25% or more interest in the company or have substantial control. What does substantial control mean? I don't know, maybe a manager, maybe it's your wife that's doing the bookkeeping and saying, hey, I don't think we ought to work this week. We want to go on vacation this week. There, she's got substantial control. You've got to disclose her name and background. So these are things. Now, of course, we want to stop the money laundering. We want to stop the people from selling arms and drugs and obviously human trafficking. That's the type of money laundering that we want, the type of criminal activity that we want to stop, and what money laundering is all about. But there's exceptions to this law, and the exceptions are if your business is making more than $5 million a year, which typically these big organizations that are trading in arms and human trafficking and things like that, they're not doing it for chump change, right? They're generally these large organizations, but they're exempt. If you're a big company, if you make over $5 million a year, you don't have to report. Why would you not be subject to any money laundering requirement laws or any laws that disclose money laundering if you make a bunch of money? I don't get that. How is that? Yeah. How does that make any sense?
What I hear is like, okay, I got to ramp up my laundering here. We're not quite there. We're at 4 million this year, guys. We got to get it up to 5 so we don't have to report to the Fincen. Oh, okay. Double time. Here we go. More money laundering. We got to really ramp it up.
Right.
Expand our business.
I see.
Or you know what? Let's just go and get some more guys off the street. As long as we have 20 employees, then we're exempt.
That's another exemption. If you have more than 20 employees.
So what you're doing is you're incentivizing the crime
to expand.
Like, we need to expand. We need to. The Sinaloa gang needs to get along with the Sonora gang, and we need to expand our business across the United States. Make more money and have more people.
Heaven forbid you be a landlord that simply doesn't want your address disclosed to the public because you don't want renters who are disgruntled coming and knocking on your door at midnight, or if you are, running a law firm and you represent. You defend criminals, and you want to not have your personal address out there on the database. You could be a prosecutor. You could be anything that is a legitimate business out there. Of course, prosecutors work for the state, so that wouldn't be a thing for a small business. But there's a lot of legitimate reasons out there that people don't want their personal address and their identification linked directly to it. That's the purpose of having a limited liability company. The company exists. You want to do business with my company? Great. You are limited to have access to the resources of this deal of what the company owns, not my personal resources. That's why I'm setting up this company. It's called limited liability because it limits my personal liability from the transaction. You got that? Great. That's why you have to disclose limited liability companies. You have to publish them when you first create them. But now they're saying, nope, you've got to disclose all your personal information.
To the federal government, yeah.
Now, we'll do a thought exercise because I think maybe some listeners might feel that, what's the big deal? Like, you guys should just be team players, and we don't like money laundering. We don't like, human trafficking. So let's just play along to get along, and that's a good thing. But I think what you need to consider is the ramifications that happen. So if you make an analogy to, let's say, the First Amendment, like you have the freedom to speak because we need to speak in order to convey ideas and get good ideas in the public square, right? But someone would say, well, those good ideas sometimes hurt people's feelings, and there's some bad things that come as a result of those things. But the argument is it's worth it. All of these bad things that people can say, it's worth having to tolerate those things in order to have free speech. And the same thing would happen for this. It's worth having the risk of money laundering and for the feds to have to do a little bit harder work in order to catch people in order to have this freedom of economy so we can have a robust economy and have a strong country. That's all. That's what we're saying, is that no one's agreeing that money laundering is good and we should incentivize it, but the benefits that come from freedom to market are greater than the risks of money laundering.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really good analogy. That brings it home. Thank you, Tom, for getting us back to where we needed to be.
You're welcome.
You're always good at that. We got to go to break. This is Life, Death, and the Law.
Coming up, more thought-provoking conversations on life, death, and the law right after this. You're listening to Life, Death, and the Law, presented by Beeson, Garner, and Hansen, the law firm that has been voted Yuma's best 6 years in a row.
Welcome back to Life, Death, and the Law. We're talking about Fincen. I know this sounds like an incredibly boring topic, but it isn't. It is awesome. And it is about anybody that owns a small business. And if you want to run that small business through an LLC or any entity that is registered with the state, like the Arizona Corporation Commission, you are now subject to reporting requirements with the Center of...
It's the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network.
Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. Just reporting to that makes me feel like a criminal.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking it through here. If I'm laundering money, and I will, first of all, I'm probably not going to have an LLC to launder that money. If I do have an LLC to do it, then I'm probably not going to report to this Financial Crimes Network and disclose my personal identity. It's kind of like the gun registration laws, that it only really applies to the law-abiding citizens, and the limitations on what type of weapons you can have and the legal guns that are out there. Criminals don't go, okay, is this legal? I'm not going to buy this if it's not legal. They're in their dark back alley doing this deal, and they're like, no, this gun is registered and it's legal, right? As they're doing this deal. No, they're going to do what they want to do because they're criminals. They don't care about the law. They don't care about civility. They don't care about... they care about getting what they want, however they want. And so when you apply it to this law here, do you think how many money laundering organizations do you think this Fincen law is going to catch? It's kind of like the TSA of small businesses. How many terrorists have the TSA caught to date? I know the TSA was implemented after 9/11, after 2001, and I know that I've taken my shoes off a gazillion times, and I've gone through a variety of different checks, between getting patted down and groped to walking through an x-ray machine that shows everything. Not that anybody wants to see that for me, but some people felt that was a violation of their privacy, and so now it's just general metal detection machines again. But in all of this, of course, going to the airport is a whole different experience, and the TSA has got zero terrorists on their actual list of achievements that they've done. Now we've got the TSA of LLCs, and that is Fincen.
Yep, always forget to take my laptop out of my bag every time.
You dirty.
I'm the one that
you should be
backs
locked
the
up.
line up.
No lights, bread and water.
That's right.
So, okay, here's another contradiction that Adam, you and I were talking through the other day. There's a big argument out there that identification is a really burdensome thing for some minorities. And in order to vote,
So burdensome.
you shouldn't have to be required to provide an ID. I mean, who in their demented mind would require somebody to provide an ID to vote? That is so racist. That is so discriminatory. But wait, hold up here. If you want to run a small business, you've got to provide not only identification, but your home address and who's got the ownership interest in the company and who's running the company. How is this not racist? I'm going to play this clip. You mentioned it before. It's between Adam Carolla, he's a great interviewer, and Gavin Newsom.
This is just beautiful. Enjoy.
I want everybody to plan, look down the road 6 months. Yes, your husband lost his job. That's why you need to sock away some money when he's gainfully employed. Yes, they foreclosed on your home.
2013, 11 years ago, absolutely obliterating him in studio. This is just beautiful. Enjoy.
I want everybody to plan, look down the road 6 months. Yes, your husband lost his job. That's why you need to sock away some money when he's gainfully employed. Yes, they foreclosed on your home. That's why you need to have a network, a community, friends, family members, money put away.
But think about
Don't
Adam,
have the kids.
Half of African Americans in the state of California, roughly half of Latino families, have no access to a checking account or an ATM. Things we take for granted. They don't have a checking account.
What's wrong with them?
And well, because they don't have the resources to sock those things away.
Well, why do we have them?
A lot of different reasons, but roughly half those families don't. Why
do Armenians have them?
But where they end up is in check cashing places.
But I want to know why those groups. Why those two groups don't have access?
Well, a lot of just happens to be that. We can talk
they're
about.
Flawed?
No, they're hardly flawed, but they're struggling.
Genetically
Folks are making
flawed.
their word. Hardly, not absolutely.
But, okay,
not.
Do Asians have this problem?
I mean, a lot of communities have. A lot of whites have these problems.
Oh,
but
so it's not just black and Hispanic.
No, but
why did you bring up black and Hispanic?
Because the magnitude is ominous.
But why so many of them?
It just happens to be the magnitude.
That's the way God planned it?
Not at all.
Well, what happened to them?
There are a lot of issues, and that the communities are struggling. A lot
Why
of new
are they
immigrants.
struggling?
A lot of different reasons. Lack of
Hispanics
opportunity.
Have been here. Blacks have been here longer than we've been here.
Well, we can surmise.
What about Asians? They were put in internment camps.
Yeah, in fact, it all initiated out of San Francisco.
All right.
The Chinese Exclusion Act came out of progressive San Francisco.
Are they the check cash?
A lot of Asians certainly do.
Oh, so why don't you conclude them?
The only reason why is the magnitude.
There's so many more.
The magnitude and percentage.
But there's no way to figure out how that happened.
We can talk about it. You know what I'm dealing with? I don't want to have a sociological debate.
Sure, why would you?
No, here's why.
Why would you want to do that? Because the person from the Times wouldn't write good things about you if you did that.
No, that's not the case, because I want to deal with reality. No.
You want to deal with reality.
I want to deal with the reality of people that are struggling, people are suffering. I want to deal with the problems in a pragmatic way. Why are they
struggling and
I don't want
suffering?
an idea. We can hold hands and surmise about all these underlying reasons.
I don't want to do that. I want to know why they're struggling. Why are they struggling?
A lot of folks are struggling because they can't find jobs.
Why blacks and
because
Hispanics?
They're working.
Why blacks and Hispanics?
Across the board, all socioeconomic.
Okay, so everybody.
Everybody's struggling.
So Asians are suffering just as much as blacks.
The face of welfare is not an African American family.
So it's Asian, Jewish, it's all of them.
Caucasian, it's
okay,
a lot of
so
folks
we're all
in society.
struggling.
A lot of folks are struggling.
Okay.
You see, it's just nothing.
So that really just brings it home, right? Once Gavin Newsom gets put on the spot and you get to the why,
yeah,
it just falls apart.
Why can't minorities have IDs? And the answer is there is no reason.
Lots of reasons.
Right?
None specific.
Yeah.
But lots.
It's why is it racist to require an ID to vote? Apparently it is, but the same people that say it is are the people that say you cannot have a small business and presume not to be using it for money laundering unless you disclose using your ID who's running the business and your personal address.
So that same argument that they use for voting, strike, and this boggles my mind, has been struck down so many times that you require an ID to vote. I don't understand that. But at the same time, and so the argument that they use to strike that down is that minority groups will be affected and they'll be disenfranchised such that they can't go and vote on the day of election, because a lot of these minority groups don't have an ID for some reason. They don't have a state-issued ID. Mm-hmm. So you can't prevent them from voting, and by doing mandatory ID checks, you're preventing them from voting. That's the argument.
I think that should be our lawsuit, Adam, that we shouldn't be required to disclose because it is burdensome on us to provide our ID in order to run a business. And therefore, we can't, federal government, provide you our ID because that's discriminatory on its face. And you've already
determined that that's the case.
Yes, determined that identification for certain aspects of participating in civic society is ID is not required, like voting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't have it both ways. It's either the argument stands for all of it, for this requirement.
Because I'd love to hear the Biden administration explain why an identification is not discriminatory.
So you're telling me that an African-American man in L.A. that has an LLC to run a small little business, maybe it's a liquor store or something like that, he doesn't have 20 employees, he's not making $5 million a year, but now he has to provide an identification to the federal government in order to continue operating and not go to jail.
A totally legitimate business.
A totally legitimate business. But that's not discriminatory. But yet he can vote without showing an ID, federal issued
and if
or
you
recognized
say
ID.
that you want your ID in order for him to vote, then you are a racist.
Yeah, it just doesn't work. Right, Tom?
That's right.
What's the Fourth Amendment argument you got against this?
Oh, the Fourth Amendment is freedom from unauthorized search and seizure, right? And I think if you want to analogize this to a traffic stop, the police, they need probable cause to be able to search your vehicle or search your person. They've got to have a reason. And here you have no reason. You said, we're going to assume that this is so dangerous that you need to provide all your information up front. We're going to go, that would be like a police officer coming to a traffic stop assuming you're a criminal. And they can't do that. They have to have some reason to believe that a crime has been committed in order to stop you at all. So I think that there's definitely some Fourth Amendment complications with this law, assuming that people have broken the law so that we need to get all your information so we can do a double check, do a search.
This actually just came up in the news, this Fourth Amendment issue. Did you see this? In our circuit, in our jurisdiction, the Ninth Circuit, they just recently determined that police cannot use an individual, let's call it a Terry stop. That's, in legal jargon, that's you're walking down the street, a policeman stops you and asks for identification. That's called a Terry stop. They're not arresting you, but they have some suspicion, something that might be probable cause, and so they ask you to stop your movement, and they're going to further interrogate you to get to the bottom of something. Well, what tends to happen is people keep walking or is like, no, leave me alone, kind of thing. Well, this just came before the Ninth Circuit panel of judges, and they said a cop cannot use that to further arrest a person. So if they get Terry stopped or you get stopped by a policeman and you walk away, you just try to distance yourself, what was happening was most of the time police would detain you for resistance, and now they've got probable cause to go deeper, maybe even arrest you. So the Ninth Circuit said no, that you can't do that just because they walk away. There's got to be some more probable cause there to actually go full arrest. And when we talk about full arrest, it's a different thing. I know we're getting off a little bit on the Fourth Amendment stuff, but to me it's very interesting because your average citizen, I don't think, understands the rights that you have when you're confronted by a policeman. And unless they say you're being detained, you're free to go in most cases.
Right, and I think that the police analogy is on the nose, particularly because the average person understands those interactions. People have been pulled over before. But when they hear about Fincen in the federal government, they think, oh, that's different. But the Fourth Amendment was not protection against police. It's protection against the government in every aspect. So just because Fincen is doing the search and not a police officer, the Fourth Amendment still applies.
Absolutely. And it goes back to Boston.
What about our Social Security number for Fincen? Do we have to supply that?
I don't remember. I know we had to put our license in there. We had to put our license number, or if you're going to use a passport, you do your passport. I don't think I put in my social.
But you have to put your residential address.
Yes, you have to put your residential address and your business address.
Isn't it your birthday too? Didn't you put your birthday?
Yeah.
So I mean, they can tie that to your social pretty easily.
Here's the thing. So you understand, when you form an entity in Arizona, it's actually very easy. You fill out who is going to be the member, how much, anybody that's going to own 25% or more, you do have to disclose that to the Arizona Corporation Commission, and you fill out your name and your mailing address. That's it.
Yeah.
That's what you disclose to create this company, And that's so when if the company gets into legal trouble or there needs to be some type of legal document served, they know who to send it to. It's a mailing address. And there is also a statutory agent that has to have a physical address to receive legal notices. But there are plenty of companies out there that will serve as your statutory agent, so you don't have to disclose. And it's specifically so you do not have to disclose where you live and where you are personally, because the whole idea of setting up the company is you want to remove yourself individually from the operations of the company. The company's got its liability, and I have my own assets and interests over here, my own family savings that I've set aside for them. And they're taking that whole idea, that concept of limiting that liability, and they're just blowing it up by putting all your information out there. Now, who gets this information? The federal government, state law enforcement agencies, and foreign governments that qualify. And that's who they say, foreign governments that qualify. Well, who are they? And how are we going to know that our information is going to be protected from anybody that wants to hack into these entities, whether it's a police department or sheriff's department or, the federal, what is it, the law enforcement network, the financial enforcement network? Now all my information's out there. And that's the whole purpose of creating the LLC in the first place, was to separate myself and limit my liability.
We're not done talking about this, but we do have to go for today. We will talk to you next week. This is Life, Death, and the Law.
If you have questions or want to know more about something that was discussed today, please call the law firm of Beeson, Garner, and Hansen at 928-783-4575 or visit yumaestateplanning.com.